Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we're going to be making the Estella bracelet with Rainbow Loom. Let's get started. So before we start, this is an example of the Estella bracelet. It has arrow bands connecting to the middle, and the arrow bands that I use, like the colors, are light green, teal, and this dark blue. And then underneath, there's two fishtails and a single chain running down the middle. And the color for that is the light blue. So now I'm going to show you what you need to make this bracelet. Okay, so to make this bracelet, the first thing you're going to need is a hook. Today, I'll be using the metal-tipped hook from Rainbow Loom. The next thing you're going to need is a loom. So you want to make sure that your loom is in this sort of configuration, and the red arrow on your loom is pointing away from you. Next, you're going to need a C-clip or an S-clip to tie off your bracelet. So today, I'm using the C-clip. And you're going to need your bands. So today, I'll be using this glow-in-the-dark white for my two fishtails and my single chain, and then also my extensions. And I'm going to need approximately 50 of these bands, and it's split into 4 different parts, so 26 of them for the fishtails, so these two fishtails here underneath the design, and then 12 of them for the middle single chain, and 1 for the cap band, and then the rest of them, depending on your wrist size, the extension bands. Now for the arrow part of the bracelet, you're going to need 20 bands, and in this bracelet I used 3 colors for the arrow part: light green, teal, and dark blue. But today I'm only going to be using 2 colors: baby blue fairy and pearl hot pink ocean. And I've split this up into 10 and 10 to make 20. So let's get started. Okay, so now we can start placing our bands. I'm going to take 1 glow-in-the-dark white because that's the band I'm using to place the 2 fishtails. So I'm going to take 1 band and I'm going to place it down on these 2 pegs right here, like that. Next, I'm going to take another band and I'm going to place it from this middle peg going to the right, like that. And for this bracelet, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be placing a set of single chain bands for this part all the way down our loom on both sides. And we're going to stop for both sides at this peg, and once we reach these 2 pegs for these sides, we're going to connect them with 2 more of these bands going to the middle peg right here. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, and we can move on to placing the next set of bands. So like I said, when you get to these 2 pegs, you're just going to take 2 more bands and just place them to the middle and connect them like so. So your loom should now look like this. And now we can place our next set of bands, which will be the arrow bands. Okay, so now is when we're starting to place our arrow bands. So what we're going to do is, instead of placing it from starting at this peg over here, we're going to go 1 peg higher and start from here. So I'm taking my first color, my baby blue fairy, and I'm taking 2 of those, and my first one is going to be for the left side, where from this peg, I'm going to just lay it diagonally down to this middle one here, like so. I'm taking my other band, and I'm doing the same thing, but for the right hand side, where I'm just going to place it down like that. And we're going to continue laying bands just like that, going to the middle, all the way down our loom. So I'm taking my next color, this hot pink ocean. And I'm just going to go for the left hand side to the middle and the right hand side to the middle. So continue the same thing all the way down your loom. So starting from the left hand side, laying it down to the middle, right hand side, and placing it to the middle. So now we're going to be placing bands that are going to this peg, and it's going to be starting with my pearl hot pink ocean, and it's just going to go from this peg here, oops, like that. And the same thing on the right hand side. And I'm just pushing down my bands so it's easier to place them. So taking my next color, my baby blue fairy, and I'm placing it on these two pegs. Same thing, placing it on these two pegs. So we're sort of making arrows pointing forward. I'm just pushing down on all my bands so that they don't pop off. And I'm taking my next color, hot pink ocean, and placing it like that. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, and you're going to stop from these two. So once you've placed all of your arrow bands that go only to these pegs right here, you're going to go back to the bottom of your loom, and we're going to start placing the bands for the single chain in the middle of our bracelet. And I'm going to be taking the white because that's what I'm going to be using. And I'm just going to place that from this peg right here, like so. And I'm going to take my other band, placing it like this. And you're just going to place a single chain all the way down the loom. So this is pretty simple because it's just like what we did in the beginning when we were placing bands for the fishtail on both sides. So this will just go all the way down the loom to ending right here in the middle where we're kind of bringing all three rows together. So once we've placed our single chain bands going all the way down our loom, we're going to turn it around so that the red arrow right here is pointing towards us. And now I'm going to take one more of my border color band, this glow in the dark white, and from this peg right here in the middle, I'm going to make a cap band. So if you don't know how to make a cap band, it's really simple. All you do is you place your band on the loom, that specific peg, so in this case it's going to be this top one right here. You're going to twist it to make a figure 8 and push it back onto the peg, like so. I'm going to do that one more time in case you need to see it again. So once again, you are placing the band on your loom, twisting it to make a figure 8, and placing it back onto that peg, like so. Now we can start the hooking process. The first step of our hooking process is to loop the single chain bands going all the way down our loom. And what you're going to do is you're going to go inside that cap band we just placed. So going inside, you're going to grab the top band and you're going to take it off and just loop it forward, like so. So it should look like this. You're just going inside that cap band with your hook, grabbing the top band, and you're just pulling it forward onto this peg. So now you're going inside this peg, grabbing that white band and looping it forward. Going inside this peg now, grabbing it, looping it forward. Going inside, grabbing, looping forward. This is really simple, and you're just continuing this same thing all the way down our loom. And after that, we're going to start with the next step of the hooking process. So this is what your loom should look like after you have looped the single chain bands. So let's move to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to be looping the border bands and the arrow bands together at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside this cap band, and we're going to grab that top band, which should be the one that's going to be left of your loom. So you're just taking that band which you're pulling off, and instead of just placing it down here, since we want to make a fishtail effect, we're going to not just loop it to this one peg, but forward here too. Same thing, going inside again to the cap band, grabbing the top band, well, it's the only band left besides the cap band on that peg, and you're looping it off the band, not just onto this one peg here, but forward. And now you're going to go inside this left peg, and you're going to grab that white band, so it should be the one that loops forward. And instead of just looping it to that one peg, you're going to loop it 2 pegs. Going into this right one here, going inside, and grabbing that bottom band that should loop forward. And you're looping it not just here, but to 2 pegs. Push down, and now we're going to go into this middle peg here to loop our arrows. So you're going to go inside and grab the top band, taking you to the left. And instead of just looping it to this one peg, just like how we got the fishtail effect here, you're going to loop it forward. Going inside and grabbing the band that's not only going here, but you're looping it to this peg forward. So we're continuing the same thing. Okay, so now we're going to go inside this peg right here, and we're going to grab that bottom white band, looping to 1 forward, and not only is it going just 1 peg, but 2 pegs forward. Going in here, and grabbing that bottom white band, looping it forward, not just 1, but 2 pegs. So why we're looping it 2 pegs forward is because it creates a fishtail effect for the band, and that's how we get a fishtail border on 2 sides of the bracelet. So now that we've looped the border white bands, we're going to go inside this peg, and we're going to loop the arrow bands now. So now instead of just going to this peg, going to 2 pegs forward, once again to create like another fishtail effect for the arrow band. Going in here, not just looping here, but looping it forward as well. And we're going to do this same thing all the way down our loom. So I'll do it a couple more times because honestly this is really simple. Grabbing that bottom band, not just looping it forward 1 peg, but 2 pegs. Going into this peg, grabbing that bottom one, and looping it 2 pegs forward. So the pattern is looping the border bands and in a fishtail effect, and then looping the arrow bands in a fishtail effect. So since we just looped the border bands, we can move on to looping the arrow bands on this peg. Going inside and grabbing the top band, taking us to the left, looping it 2 pegs forward. Going inside this peg, grabbing that last right arrow band, not just looping it here, but 2 pegs forward. So since we looped the arrow bands now, we have to move on to the next set of border bands to loop. So going into this peg where we just looped the arrow band, we're going to grab the bottom white band and loop it 2 pegs forward. Same thing, going in here, grabbing, and looping it 2 pegs forward. Now going into this arrow band, looping it 2 pegs forward, going in here, taking us to the right side, and looping forward. So we loop the arrow bands, and now it's time to loop the white band that is placed where the arrow band is looped. So going 2 pegs forward, and oops, that band came off, it's okay, and looping it 2 pegs forward and not just 1. So since we looped the white bands now, it's time to loop the arrow bands. So once again, going inside this peg, grabbing the top band, not just looping it here, but here too. Same thing, going here, not just here, but over here as well. So you're just going to continue the same process down the loom, and I'll show you what to do when you get here. Okay, so once you've looped all of the border bands and the arrow bands all the way up to this set of bands here, you're going to just go inside, and you're going to just grab that bottom band, and you're doing the same thing. You're looping it 2 pegs forward. Now going into this peg, and you're just grabbing the band here, and looping it 2 pegs forward. So same thing for these last batches of arrow bands. It's the same thing that we've been doing for like the other half of our loom, where we're just going inside and grabbing the arrow band, looping it 2 pegs forward, going inside this peg, and we're grabbing the arrow band and looping it not just 1 but 2 pegs forward. Now when you get to these 2 border band that we're going to be looping forward, since there's no peg above, you're just looping it here. So if you want, you can end this off, not just doing it a fishtail, but just doing it in a single chain forward. And the other option is, instead of just looping it forward and not in a fishtail, you can go inside and loop it in a fishtail. So instead of looping it forward 2 pegs, you go around this peg and you loop it here. So I'll show you what that would look like. So if you're going into it with this peg, you're grabbing it, and if you're doing fishtail, you're going around this peg, and instead of looping it forward, but since there's no peg there, going around it and looping it here, and you're just doing the same thing on this side. So going inside, grabbing the white band, not just looping it here, you're just going to skip that one, loop around, and move it here. So if you're doing it like that, this is what you would do to make a fishtail effect for these bands too. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to just skip around the band, the peg, and go to the other peg here. What you can do is just loop it forward. But I'm doing the fishtail effect, so I'm going to leave it like this. Now you have this white band here, which connects to this middle peg, and you're just going to go inside, grab it, and loop it to this peg, and you're going to go inside on this side and grab it, loop it forward. Now we're going to just clear all these bands off our loom. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick our hook inside this peg with all the white bands on top, and we're taking 1 white band and we're looping it onto our hook like that. Now when we have it on our hook, what we're going to do is, with all the bands that's on the loom of that peg, you're just going to slide your hook through all those bands and bring it around into a catch like that. So basically all of these bands on this peg is just looped onto this single band right here. And now we're going to take our clip and we're just going to secure it for now so we can take off the other bands on our loom. So transfer what's on your hook onto your 2 fingers, and you're going to take your clip and clip it right there in the middle. Now taking your hook, you're just going to take off all the bands on your loom. So this is pretty simple, and I'm just going to do this all off camera so I can show you what you have to do after that. So this is what the bracelet looks like when you take it off the loom, and I really like it better with this white border because it's more clear to see the fishtail and single chain underneath. And now when you have these 2 bands that are clipped to the C-clip, what you're going to do is you're just going to put that back onto your fingers, and you're going to remove the C-clip, take back your loom, and you're going to just be using these 2 pegs right here. So I'm just going to separate it into 2 different hands like that, and I'm going to put that band right here like this. And now we're going to make our extension. So we're just going to make a single chain, and what we're going to do is we're going to place 1 band on top of these 2 pegs and take the bottom band with our hook and loop it forward like so. Push down so we can place more bands on top. So placing it here and looping it. So this is really simple because it's just making a single chain, and all you're doing is you're just looping that bottom band forward once you've placed one on top. So I'm going to do the rest of my extension off camera. Just a little side note while you're making your extension. So feel free to use as many bands that you need for the extension, because this single chain is what helps add on to the bracelet in order for it to fit your wrist. So you might need 12 bands, you might only need 7, but whatever works for you. So once you think you have the right amount of bands to be long enough to fit your wrist size, you are just going to take one side of the band. So I'll just use this side, and I'm going to take it off my peg and bring it to the other side and place it back onto this peg. Now I'm going to stick my hook in, take the bracelet off of the loom and onto the hook, and then transfer it from the hook onto my 2 fingers, and I'm going to take my C-clip again, C-clip or S-clip, whatever you're using. I'm going to clip it onto these 2 bands, and once I've done that, I'm just going to take the other end of this clip and go to the other end of the bracelet, and the hat band here is where you're going to hook onto the other side. And this is what the bracelet looks like. So this is what the bracelet looks like on your wrist. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new video. Bye!